I am the king!
Joffrey Baratheon's voice cracks with adolescent fury as he shouts these words at his grandfather during a small council meeting in Season 3. The response comes swift and devastating. Any man who must say, "I am the king," is no true king. With that single sentence, Tywin Lannister doesn't just win an argument, he obliterates Joffrey's credibility as a ruler in front of the most powerful people in the realm. This scene reveals the brutal mechanics of political authority. Real power isn't granted by titles or birthright, but earned through competence, respect, and the ability to project strength without desperation. By forcing Joffrey to explicitly claim his authority, Tywin exposes that the boy king possesses none of the qualities that make authority legitimate or sustainable. But this moment does more than humiliate Joffrey. It demonstrates how quickly perceived power can evaporate when someone calls your bluff in public, and why the most dangerous thing a leader can do is appear weak in front of those who must believe in their strength. The perfect setup for humiliation. The small council chamber represents the nerve center of Westerosi political power, where the kingdom's most crucial decisions are made by its most influential figures. Every person seated at that table, Tyrion, Cersei, Grand Maester Pycelle, Varys, understands the delicate balance of authority that keeps the realm functioning. This isn't a place for theatrics or emotional outbursts. It's where real politics happens. Tywin has orchestrated this entire scenario with surgical precision. He arrives late to the meeting, forcing everyone else to wait. When he enters, he doesn't take the traditional seat at the king's right hand. He walks deliberately to the opposite end of the table, claiming the head position for himself. This isn't accidental position. It's a calculated power move, designed to establish physical and psychological dominance. Watch how the other council members react to Tywin's entrance and seating choice. No one protests. No one points out the impropriety. They recognize real authority when they see it, regardless of formal titles or seating protocols. Their silent acceptance of Tywin's dominance becomes the first piece of evidence that Joffrey's reign exists only at his grandfather's pleasure. Joffrey initially tries to ignore this challenge, continuing with council business as if nothing has changed. But the physical geography of the room now tells a different story than the official hierarchy. The supposed king sits in the middle. The psychology of desperate authority. I am the king. These 4 words represent complete political suicide. The moment Joffrey feels compelled to explicitly state his authority, he reveals that he doesn't actually possess it. True power never needs to announce itself. It simply acts and expects compliance. When someone has to remind others of their position, they've already lost the psychological battle for dominance. Think about what drives Joffrey to this moment of desperation. He's watching his grandfather command the room without saying a word about royal prerogatives or inherited rights. Tywin doesn't need to claim authority. He demonstrates it through competence, presence, and the unconscious deference of everyone around him. This makes Joffrey's formal title feel increasingly meaningless. The boy king faces an impossible psychological dilemma. If he says nothing, he appears to accept his irrelevance in his own council chamber. But if he objects, he reveals his insecurity and desperation for recognition. Tywin has created a situation where any response from Joffrey will damage his credibility. Joffrey chooses the worst possible option, an emotional outburst that sounds like a child's tantrum rather than a monarch's command. His voice betrays his youth and inexperience. His body language suggests panic rather than confidence. Instead of projecting the calm certainty that characterizes real authority, he displays exactly the kind of juvenile emotionalism that makes people question his fitness to rule. This specific phrasing reveals even more about Joffrey's psychological state. He doesn't say, "I'm your king," or "you serve at my pleasure," statements that would at least acknowledge the relationship between ruler and subject. Instead, he makes an abstract declaration, "I am the king." It's the political equivalent of a child shouting, "I'm telling mom." Technically accurate but completely impotent. This outburst also reveals how little Joffrey understands about the nature of royal authority. He thinks kingship is about getting to make demands and having them obeyed automatically. He doesn't grasp that effective monarchy requires the ability to inspire loyalty, manage complex personalities, and navigate competing interests with skill and wisdom. Real authority operates through subtle influence and demonstrated competence. People follow effective leaders because they believe in their judgment, respect their abilities, or fear the consequences of opposition. Joffrey possesses none of these qualities, so he falls back on the one thing he thinks he has, his formal title. The devastating precision of Tywin's response. Any man who must say, "I am the king," is no true king. Tywin's response destroys Joffrey with surgical precision, because it doesn't just contradict him, it exposes the fundamental flaw in his understanding of power. The statement works on multiple levels simultaneously, each one designed to strip away another layer of Joffrey's credibility. First, it establishes a universal principle about authority that everyone in the room can recognize is true. Think about the most powerful people they know: Robert Baratheon at his peak, Ned Stark in the north, Tywin himself. None of them needed to remind people of their positions, because their authority was evident in their actions and the responses of others. Second, it reframes Joffrey's outburst as proof of weakness rather than strength. Instead of seeing a king asserting his prerogatives, everyone now sees a boy desperately trying to convince himself and others of something that isn't really true. The very fact that he felt compelled to make the declaration becomes evidence against his legitimacy. Third, it positions Tywin as the voice of wisdom and experience, speaking truth to power. He's not challenging the institution of monarchy. He's explaining how real monarchy actually works. This makes him appear as a teacher correcting a student's mistake rather than a subject defying his king. The phrasing is particularly devastating. No true king. Tywin doesn't deny that Joffrey holds the title legally. He suggests that possessing the formal position without the accompanying authority makes someone a false king rather than a real one. This distinction cuts to the heart of Joffrey's deepest insecurities about his legitimacy and competence. Notice also the calm, almost gentle tone Tywin uses to deliver this destruction. He doesn't shout or show anger. He speaks like a grandfather offering hard-earned wisdom to a confused grandson. This paternal tone makes Joffrey's emotional outburst look even more childish by contrast, while positioning Tywin as the adult in the room. The timing of the response adds another layer of humiliation. Tywin doesn't immediately contradict Joffrey's declaration. He lets it hang in the air for a moment, allowing everyone to process how desperate and hollow it sounds. Only then does he speak, creating maximal impact for his rebuttal. Most importantly, Tywin doesn't just criticize Joffrey's behavior. He articulates a philosophy of leadership that implicitly judges Joffrey and finds him wanting. According to this philosophy, true kings don't need to announce their authority because they embody it naturally through their presence, judgment, and the respect they command from others. The audience that seals the destruction. The presence of the small council transforms this exchange from a private family disagreement into a public political execution. Every person in that room represents a crucial pillar of royal power: the treasury, the intelligence network, the administrative apparatus, the noble houses. Their witness to Joffrey's humiliation makes it politically consequential rather than merely personally embarrassing. Watch how the council members react during this exchange. Tyrion tries to hide his smirk but can't quite manage it. He's watching his nephew receive the kind of lesson he's probably wanted to deliver for years. Cersei sits frozen, recognizing that her father has just destroyed her son's credibility, but unable to intervene without making things worse. Varys and Pycelle maintain careful neutrality, but their silence speaks volumes about where they believe the real power lies. These aren't random observers. They're the people who must implement royal decisions and maintain the machinery of government. Their confidence in the king's authority directly affects their willingness to carry out his orders effectively. When they watch Joffrey get intellectually dismantled by his grandfather, it fundamentally changes their assessment of who they're really working for. The political implications ripple outward immediately. If the king's own hand can humiliate him in front of the small council, what does that say about his ability to command respect from foreign diplomats, noble houses, or military commanders? The people in this room will inevitably share what they witnessed with their own networks of allies and subordinates. Within days, Every major political figure in King's Landing will know that Joffrey was reduced to helpless fury by a single sentence from his grandfather. Within weeks, this story will spread throughout the Seven Kingdoms, fundamentally altering how other leaders calculate their relationship with the Iron Throne. The scene also creates lasting psychological damage for Joffrey himself. From this moment forward, he'll second-guess every interaction with Tywin, never sure when another devastating put-down might come. His confidence in his own authority has been shattered in the most public way possible, creating a cycle of insecurity that will affect all his future decision-making. More subtly, the other council members now understand the true hierarchy of power in King's Landing. They've seen that crossing Tywin carries serious consequences, while defying Joffrey might be politically irrelevant as long as they maintain the hand's approval. This fundamentally changes the internal dynamics of royal governance. The broader implications for royal authority. This exchange reveals something crucial about how political authority actually functions, versus how it's supposed to work in theory. According to formal structures, the king's word is law, and his authority derives from divine right, inheritance, and institutional tradition. But in practice, authority must be constantly maintained through competence, respect, and the ability to project strength when challenged. Joffrey represents the fundamental weakness of hereditary power systems. They can place incompetent people in positions of enormous responsibility, without providing any mechanism for removing them when they prove unfit. His authority exists only because of his bloodline, not because of any demonstrated ability to lead effectively or command genuine loyalty. Tywin, by contrast, represents merit-based power. His authority comes from his proven competence as a military commander, political strategist, and administrator. People follow him not because they have to, but because they believe he can deliver results and protect their interests effectively. This makes his influence more genuine and sustainable than Joffrey's inherited position. The scene demonstrates how quickly institutional authority can collapse when it's not backed by personal credibility. Joffrey holds the most powerful position in Westeros, but his inability to command respect makes that position functionally meaningless. Meanwhile, Tywin exercises real power through the simple expedient of being obviously more competent than everyone else in the room. This has profound implications for the stability of the realm. If the official head of state lacks credibility with his own advisors, how can he hope to maintain authority over distant noble houses or foreign adversaries? The gap between Joffrey's formal position and actual capabilities creates a systemic weakness that enemies can exploit. The exchange also reveals the inherent tension between different sources of political legitimacy. Joffrey's claim to authority rests on legal inheritance and institutional tradition. Tywin's influence comes from demonstrated competence and practical necessity. When these two forms of legitimacy come into direct conflict, merit-based authority proves more powerful than inherited position. This pattern repeats throughout Westerosi history and reflects real-world political dynamics. Formal institutions can only maintain their authority when they're staffed by people capable of meeting their responsibilities effectively. When incompetent individuals occupy crucial positions, the institutions themselves become weakened and vulnerable to challenge or collapse. The psychological aftermath and long-term consequences. The immediate aftermath of this exchange shows its lasting psychological impact on everyone involved. Joffrey doesn't recover his composure or attempt to reassert his authority. He essentially retreats into sullen silence for the remainder of the meeting. This response confirms everything Tywin's rebuke implied about his fundamental unfitness for leadership. A more skilled political operator might have found ways to save face after such a public humiliation. They could have gracefully acknowledged the wisdom of their elder, redirected the conversation to substantive matters, or found subtle ways to reassert their position without appearing desperate. Joffrey's inability to manage this situation reveals his complete lack of political instincts. The scene also marks a turning point in Joffrey's relationship with his own authority. Before this moment, he could maintain some illusion that his position gave him real power over the most important people in his government. Afterward, he knows with certainty that his grandfather can humiliate him at will. and that knowledge affects every subsequent interaction between them. This psychological vulnerability makes Joffrey increasingly erratic and cruel in later episodes. Marked 5. Unable to command genuine respect through competence, he becomes more reliant on fear and brutality to maintain his position. The Purple Wedding represents the ultimate consequence of this approach. When your authority depends entirely on others' fear rather than respect, you create powerful incentives for people to remove you permanently. For the other characters present, this scene fundamentally alters their understanding of power dynamics in King's Landing. They've witnessed the moment when the illusion of royal authority was stripped away to reveal the reality of Lannister family politics. This knowledge affects all their future calculations about loyalty, allegiance, and political survival. Tyrion, in particular, gains crucial insight into his father's methods and priorities. He sees how Tywin maintains control not through emotional manipulation or crude threats, but through the simple demonstration of intellectual and moral superiority. This lesson influences Tyrion's own approach to political challenges throughout the rest of the series. Cersei faces perhaps the most complex psychological aftermath. As Joffrey's mother, she wants to protect him from humiliation, but as a Lannister, she recognizes the truth in her father's assessment. She's caught between her maternal instincts and her political pragmatism, a conflict that shapes many of her subsequent decisions. The scene also establishes a template for how power transitions might occur in Westeros. If the official monarch can be so easily dominated by his hand, it raises questions about where ultimate authority actually resides, and whether formal succession rules have any practical meaning when they conflict with competence-based leadership. The Masterclass in Political Dominance. This brief exchange represents one of the most efficient displays of political dominance in the entire series. With a single sentence, Tywin accomplishes multiple strategic objectives. He establishes his intellectual superiority, demonstrates his authority over the nominal king, educates everyone present about the true nature of power, and positions himself as the indispensable adult in a room full of children playing at politics. The technique works because it doesn't rely on crude force or obvious manipulation. Instead, Tywin uses Joffrey's own words against him, turning the boy's attempt at assertion into proof of his inadequacy. This approach is much more devastating than external attacks because it forces the victim to confront the truth about their own limitations. Notice how Tywin never explicitly claims authority for himself during this exchange. He doesn't say, "I am the real power here," or "you should listen to me." Instead, he lets the contrast between his competence and Joffrey's desperation speak for itself. This subtlety makes his dominance more complete because it appears natural and inevitable rather than forced. The scene also demonstrates the importance of choosing your moments for maximum impact. Tywin could have corrected Joffrey's behavior privately, but he deliberately waits for a public forum where the lesson will have broader political consequences. He understands that authority is largely about perception, and perceptions must be shaped in front of audiences that matter. Most importantly, Tywin's approach creates lasting change rather than temporary compliance. A cruder display of power might have forced Joffrey to back down in the moment, while leaving his fundamental misconceptions about authority intact. By attacking the philosophical foundation of Joffrey's approach to leadership, Tywin creates psychological damage that affects all the boy's future behavior. The exchange reveals why Tywin Lannister was considered one of the most formidable political operators in Westeros. He possesses the rare combination of strategic patience, psychological insight, and perfect timing that allows him to achieve maximum impact with minimum effort. He doesn't waste energy on unnecessary conflicts. He waits for the perfect moment to strike with devastating precision. The death of an illusion. By the time this scene ends, something fundamental has changed in the political landscape of King's Landing. The illusion that Joffrey Baratheon was a real king capable of independent rule has been completely destroyed. Everyone who witnessed this exchange understands that the Iron Throne is occupied by a puppet whose strings are controlled by his grandfather. This revelation has cascading effects throughout the power structure of Westeros. Noble houses recalculate their allegiances based on where they believe real authority lies, Foreign diplomats adjust their negotiating strategies to account for who actually makes decisions. Military commanders wonder whether orders from the king carry the same weight as suggestions from the hand. The scene also marks the moment when Joffrey's authority becomes irreversibly damaged goods. Once people stop believing in a leader's competence, it becomes nearly impossible to restore that confidence. Every subsequent mistake or display of weakness confirms their initial judgment, creating a downward spiral of lost credibility. For viewers, this moment provides crucial insight into why political systems succeed or fail. Institutions are only as strong as the people who occupy them, and when key positions are filled by individuals who lack the necessary skills or temperament, the entire system becomes vulnerable to collapse or conquest. The exchange between Joffrey and Tywin ultimately demonstrates that in politics, as in many other domains, reality eventually trumps illusion. You can maintain false authority for a while through institutional inertia, family connections, or pure luck, but eventually, you'll face a situation that requires real competence, genuine respect, or authentic strength, and if you don't possess those qualities, your limitations will be exposed for everyone to see. In teaching the small council that no true king needs to announce his authority, Tywin doesn't just humiliate his grandson, he articulates a fundamental truth about power that makes Joffrey's continued reign psychologically untenable for everyone involved, including the boy king himself.